The deep sea is home to many mysteries, from creepy creatures to strange anomalies, but this one is for my history buffs. So join me as we take a look at some of the coolest and most mysterious artifacts that were found way down deep in the deep blue sea. Starting us off today, we have Yonaguni Formation, also known as Japan's Atlantis, discovered in the 1980s just off the coast of Yonaguni Island in Japan. The formation is a massive underwater rock structure coming in at more than 50 meters, 165 feet long, and 20 meters, 65 feet wide. Some people have speculated that the monument is the lost city of Lemuria, the home of the lemurs, which is argued to be at least 5,000 years old. On the other hand, though, many scientists maintain that the structure occurred naturally, shaped only by the currents of the ocean. Personally, I just can't get behind that. I mean, this thing has steps, and the last time I checked, erosion doesn't create such sharp angles. It should be noted, however, that this thing is made out of solid rock and not bricks. So to carve it all out and to shape it into what it is today would have taken the peoples of Lemuria hundreds of years to do. So what do you guys think? Let us know. Next up, we have an ancient shipwreck in which a 15-meter, 49-foot boat was discovered, which is estimated to have sailed over 2,000 years ago for the Roman Empire. The discovery, which was made in October of 2014 off the coast of Italy, is believed to have either been a merchant ship or a military vessel. Regardless of what it was, though, one thing is for sure, it must have been packed with olive oils and fine wines, as the area in which the wreck was found was absolutely littered with hundreds of terracotta pots that would have been used to store such delicacies at the time. The ship is estimated to have been an active transport vessel making its way back and forth between Rome and Carthage way back in 218 to 210 BC. Next on the list, we have a series of ancient Egyptian artifacts discovered in the area in which the Nile River flows into the Mediterranean Sea. The discovery, which was made by Frank Goriot in 2000, included 250 ancient artifacts, two of which were enormous granite sculptures, one of a pharaoh and the other of an Egyptian god, Hapi, spelled H-A-P-I, who was said to have kept the soils of Egypt fertile by annually flooding the Nile. The discovery has excited researchers as it has been linked to two sunken cities, Canopus and Thonis, which are said to have rumbled into the sea in the latter half of the 8th century after a series of natural disasters. Upon further investigation of the area, it also appears as though a canal had existed that would have connected the now underwater cities to the second largest city in the country, Alexandria. Next up, we have the Antikythera wreck, discovered on the east side of the Greek island Antikythera, which gave way to two very significant scientific, historical, and archaeological discoveries, one of which is referred to as the Antikythera mechanism, which is an ancient Greek ore used to predict the relative positions and motions of the planets and moons in order to identify events such as solar and lunar eclipses. As the artifact has been dated all the way back to somewhere around 100 BC, it is an extremely advanced piece of technology and is recognized as the very first example of an analog computer. The second rare find made at the wreck site was none other than a human skeleton. And the reason this is so incredible is because of the fact that human remains are almost never found at the site of shipwrecks, especially ones this old, due to scavengers, ocean currents, and natural decomposition, making the body disappear. Finding the 2,000-year-old skeleton buried under ocean sediment gives scientists an opportunity to push the boundaries of ancient DNA analysis and provide information about both heritage and ancient diseases. Alright guys, I'm gonna say something, but I need you to be mature, okay? Because next on the list we have an underwater temple, the remains of an ancient lost city located in Lake Titicaca. Get over it. The remains were discovered in 2000 by an international archaeological dive team along the border of Bolivia and Peru at an estimated depth of 281 meters, around 929 feet. The temple is estimated to be between 1,000 and 1,500 years old, meaning it would have existed during the time of the Tiwanaku people, before the Incan civilization was ever even formed. Found among the ruins were many golden artifacts, but perhaps the most interesting find was the long roads and terraces designed for growing crops that give archaeologists and historians some great insight into the agricultural understanding of not only the Tiwanaku people, but any person living between the year 500 and 1000 in the area. And next we have, surprise, another underwater city, specifically the underwater city of Port Royal, located in Jamaica and commonly referred to as the Sunken Pirate City. The area is known to be one of the most wicked places on Earth due to the fact that at one time it was completely overrun by pirates who pillaged the town, causing chaos, destruction, and devastation. Once considered the most important trading post in the New World, the city fell to the seas at exactly 11:43 on June 7th in 1692 due to a massive earthquake which was quickly followed by a gigantic tsunami. The city sunk in less than 2 minutes, and it is the only known sunken city in the Western Hemisphere. Next, we have a 900-year-old Crusader sword recovered from the Israeli seafloor off of the coast of northern Israel in 2021, not by scientists or historians, but rather a recreational diver who decided to take a solo dip in the country's temperate waters, which I do not recommend, by the way. If you go diving, please bring a buddy. Although the iron artifact was found covered in corals and shells, its shape was a dead giveaway to Shlomi Katzin, who knew it had to be something cool. Katzin turned the item over to experts who used an advanced X-ray machine that allowed them to view the item beneath its oceanic crust. Now, if you're starting to think the thick layer of ocean sediment, corals, and shells has become a bit of a nuisance in the process of recovering, identifying, and presenting this sword, you should know that this layer is the only reason for the sword being around today, as without it, the iron would have dissolved hundreds of years ago and there would have been no sword to find. Hold on to your heads because this next one is one. A bronze one, that is. Think about it. Now think about the fact that you're thinking about it. It's a philosopher's head. Well, a statue of one. Presumably Pythagoras of Samos. And why does that name sound familiar? Well, because a squared plus b squared equals c squared, and the square root of a squared plus b squared equals c. But let me stop torturing you with math and we can get back to the square root of this discovery. The head, which was determined to have been forged during 500 BC, was discovered off the coast of Sicily in Italy, but it is said to have belonged to the Greeks. This discovery has raised many questions about how it came to be washed along the shores of the Italian region, and researchers are now keeping a close eye on the area in hopes of discovering more ancient artifacts like this one. And that brings us to New Jersey's mysterious underwater locomotive graveyard, discovered in 1985. The two engines were found at a depth of about 27.5 meters, 90 feet, and are believed to be over 100 years old. The locomotives were identified as Class 222T, which apparently is super rare, as they usually remain in train yards and are hardly ever used for transportation. So how did they go from not leaving the lot to ending up in the ocean? We have no idea, as there are zero records regarding their disappearance. Some researchers believe that they were lost at sea while being shipped from Boston to New York, perhaps due to a treacherous storm or high waves, but again, no records. Not only that, but the way in which the engines sit, one directly behind the other as if they were making their way down a railroad track, has left historians just downright confused about the discovery. And in the #1 spot, we have Queen Anne's Revenge. Some of you guys already know this, but I grew up pretty close to where the Pirates of the Caribbean was filmed, so I'm super excited for this one, as the Queen Anne once belonged to the most infamous pirate who ever lived, Blackbeard. And no, he's not just a character from the franchise. Blackbeard, whose real name was Edward Teach, lived between 1680 and 1718 and was based in none other than Port Royal. In 1717, Blackbeard got his hands on a Bristol-built ship named Concord, which he changed to none other than the Queen Anne's Revenge. Now, if you're paying attention, you'd notice that based on the dates, Blackbeard would have had possession of the vessel for a year tops. Well, it was actually less, as on November 22nd of 1718, in a drawn-out battle, Blackbeard was pew 5 times and more than 20 times. After his passing, the Queen Anne became property of Captain Thatch, under whom she met her surprisingly uneventful end, after becoming beached on an underwater sandbar near Beaufort, North Carolina, eventually sinking as the water levels rose and the sand fell away. The vessel was rediscovered November 21st of 1996, literally one day before the anniversary of Blackbeard's death, by a private research team in Beaufort Inlet. While you are able to visit the site of the wreck, if you can call it that, it's important to note that it is a working underwater archaeological site, so doing so would require 1.5 days of educational training, but I say it's worth it.
There's something very mysterious about this pillar in India, known as the Iron Pillar of Delhi. It seems impervious to rust, even after 1,600 years of being exposed to the elements. The pillar dates back to the Gupta period around 375 to 413 AD, and the fact that it doesn't rust is pretty impressive. Building something like this would have been challenging without advanced technology and precise chemical treatments. Standing about 23 feet tall and weighing over 6 tons, the pillar was first erected in Udayagiri and later moved to its current location. It bears an inscription in Sanskrit praising a king named Chandra, believed to be Chandragupta II. The pillar has been exposed to harsh weather for centuries, but it's still mostly rust-free. It turns out that the iron used in the pillar was made of misawite, which is a compound of iron, oxygen, and hydrogen which helps protect the iron from rusting, but the method they would have used to achieve this is still a mystery and makes some people wonder if certain ancient civilizations had access to technology far beyond their or even our time.
If you were to Google when the first battery was invented, you would be told that it was invented in 1800 by Alessandro Volta and John Stringfellow. Great name, by the way. But that would be wrong, because in 1938, archaeologists discovered the first true battery, which was actually created around 2,000 years ago. The batteries, made with clay jars and iron rods capable of producing more than a volt of electricity, were found just outside of Baghdad, Iraq. 3 were discovered, and since their discovery, nothing of the like has ever been found again. The exact origin of the batteries remains unclear, but what is clear is that the society that made them was either incredibly advanced or had help from someone from the future, perhaps even Volta and Stringfellow. And if that's the case, the answer Google gives you would be in fact correct. It's possible. Anything's possible.
The Saqqara bird is a small wooden artifact that was found in an ancient Egyptian tomb near Saqqara. It's about 2,200 years old, and at first glance, it's a bird. But when you look a little closer, you might notice that it looks a lot like a model airplane. Unlike other bird statues from ancient Egypt, this one doesn't have legs, and its wings are shaped differently. It's a pretty unique design that just adds another layer of mystery to the history of ancient Egypt, which is already full of mysteries. Did ancient Egyptians know something about flying? Back in 1969, an Egyptian doctor suggested that the Saqqara bird might be an ancient model of some sort of flying machine. People have even made replicas of it to see if it could fly, and some of these models do glide pretty well when launched. Now, most archaeologists think the thing was just a toy, but I mean, what if they did know more than we give them credit for? Or what if someone far in the future managed to pay them a visit, and some ancient Egyptian sculptor based this small wooden piece off of a strange, unexplained object they saw gliding overhead one day?
If Antarctica was discovered in January of 1820, then tell me, why did it show up on a map created in 1513? The Piri Reis map, to be exact, created by Turkish admiral and cartographer Piri Reis. While the map doesn't outright say the word Antarctica, many people believe the landmass located at the bottom right corner to be representative of the continent, about 34 million years ago before it became covered in ice. This was confirmed by Captain Lorenzo W. Burroughs of the US Air Force, who said that the landmass in the Piri Reis map accurately depicted the coast of Antarctica that is now currently hidden under ice. This is strange for a few reasons. 1. How did Piri Reis know about Antarctica? And 2. If Antarctica froze 34 million years ago and the map was made in 1513, how did Piri Reis know about its formerly subtropical climate without the use of modern day technology? Is this guy a time traveler, and if so, did he travel backwards or forwards to learn this information?
The London hammer is one of the most famous out-of-place artifacts. It was found in 1936 in London, Texas, by a couple named Max and Emma Hahn while they were out exploring. They found the hammer embedded in a rock formation that was estimated to be around 100 million years old. The hammer itself looks surprisingly modern though. It has a wooden handle and a metal head, which, when examined, seems to be made of iron and steel, materials that weren't supposed to be around during the time the rock was formed. The rock surrounding the hammer was found to be from the Cretaceous period, a time when dinosaurs roamed the earth, long before humans or even advanced tools like this hammer were believed to have existed. There are some pretty wacky but fun ideas about the hammer, one being that it could be a remnant from a future civilization that somehow ended up in the past and accidentally left the tool behind.
Nuclear energy was invented on December 2nd of 1942, but the first nuclear reactor existed almost 2 billion years ago. How does that work? Well, I'll tell you. In 1972, a French factory was importing uranium ore from Africa's Gabon Republic when they stumbled across something fascinating. A 2-billion-year-old large-scale nuclear reactor that was likely in operation for some 500,000 years. Now, while some scientists claim the reactor to be nothing more than a fluke natural phenomenon, others, such as Dr. Glenn T. Seaborg, former head of the United States Atomic Energy Commission and Nobel Prize winner for his work in synthesis of heavy elements, believes the reactor to be man-made because, in his words, in order for uranium to burn in a reactor, very precise conditions are needed. Conditions that he does not believe just somehow happened in nature. The question here is, did someone go back in time to create this, or did someone go forward in time to spread the good word about the endless possibilities of nuclear energy? You tell me.
Back in 2012, a strange cylindrical object was discovered by residents of a small rural village in Siberia. The object weighed hundreds of pounds and was unlike anything anyone had seen before. Village residents hooked it up to a trailer and hauled it back to town, where they alerted the authorities, who came and picked it up to be studied. Now, the villagers, as well as folks on the internet, started speculating as to what this mysterious object was and where it came from. Of course, space was being thrown around in almost every conversation. Was this part of some secretive spacefaring government technology? Was it alien in origin? Well, an official at the Russian Space Agency soon made a statement that the object had no relation to space technology of any kind, but if it wasn't part of a spacecraft of some kind, then what was it, and how did it end up there? Nobody knows.
For a while, it was widely accepted that the first spark plug was invented in 1839, but all that changed in 1961 when 3 individuals stumbled across a much older version of a spark plug encased in a geode in California while out searching for items to sell in their gem and gift shop. After the discovery, a geologist dated the device to be at least 500,000 years old, if not older. While some people believe the device to have been a modern spark plug encased in a quick-forming concretion rather than a geode, there is not enough concrete evidence to support that theory. And so many people continue to believe the device to be an incredibly advanced relic from ancient times. Or perhaps it is a modern-day spark plug that was placed in ancient times as some kind of Easter egg for the future. Either one is pretty cool.
Take a look at this formation here. It certainly seems to be ancient, and it is. It's also incredibly mysterious. It's called the Porobajin, and ever since it was discovered, archaeologists and historians have been trying to figure out who built it and why. Situated in a lake in southern Siberia, the ancient structure, which was discovered in 1891, seems to have been built around 1300 years ago. It's one of Russia's strangest historical landmarks. There's just no concrete information about its purpose, its builders, and the rationale behind choosing such an isolated location to build it. It's in an area well away from any settlements or trade routes. It's also lacking a heating system, which is strange because of the harsh winters at its high altitude location. The layout of the ruins seems to have a bit of a Chinese influence though, almost like city palaces from the Tang dynasty. The neat grid arrangement of smaller houses around the inner courtyard is similar to many Tang Buddhist monasteries, but there's still no definitive evidence as to what this place was. Was it a monastery, a palace complex, a fusion of both, or could it possibly have been built by beings not from this world?
You know what suggests that time travel exists? Ancient texts estimated to have been written in 400 BC talking about how time travel exists. Specifically, Mahabharata, an ancient piece of Hindu text that alludes to the phenomenon. On numerous occasions, the 1,500-page script mentions incidents in which individuals traveled through time and experienced something called time dilation, a physical phenomenon in which time moves differently for different observers in the same inertial frame. Time travel has also been mentioned in the Quran, written around 250 CE, the Odysseus II, a Christian text written around 420 CE, the Urashima Taro, a Japanese text written in the 18th century, and many other pieces of ancient literature. The concept is far from new, but if time travel is real, then time is an illusion, and new is just a word that, in the scheme of things, doesn't really matter.
And we're going to start off the list with a very recent find. This just happened last month, which was February of 2024 for those who may be possibly watching in the distant future. A dude stumbled on a massive ancient Roman artifact in a riverbed. It was found in the gravel of the Torre River in San Vito al Torre. Arvino Silvestri was the one who first spotted the ancient artifact and alerted archaeologists. The riverbank was excavated, and the archaeologists uncovered a massive block of carved limestone, revealing it to be an ancient Roman funeral monument, weighed in at a whopping 13,000 pounds, and it was in pretty good condition. It's so big and heavy that it required an excavator for transportation. Pretty remarkable find, and quite beautiful as well. It has an intricately carved figure of Erotes on one end, holding a torch and a poppy flower. Erotes symbolized various things, including love and death. The decoration style suggested that the monument was from the high imperial era of ancient Rome, but at this point we still don't have an exact date range. At least it hasn't been released to the public yet. Again, this is still a very new find, but this wasn't all they found either. There was also a stone urn, a limestone carving depicting a man's face, and a number of bricks and tile pieces. Next on the list is what I'm just going to call the treasure trove. Now, this news just came out last week at the time of recording this video. Archaeologists in Panama unearthed an ancient burial site filled with treasures at El Caño Archaeological Park. The burial dates back between 750 AD and 800 AD and looks like it must have belonged to an elite lord. The burial revealed the remains of a high-status man who was likely between 30 and 40 when he died. Aside from bones, though, there was a whole bunch of treasure. Breastplates, belts adorned with gold, beads, intricate bracelets, earrings. There were even a pair of crocodile-shaped earrings, which is pretty cool. They also found gold-covered sperm whale teeth earrings. How extravagant is that? Not only do I have a necklace with whale teeth, but I gotta get them coated in gold too. That's not even all they found. They also uncovered bracelets and skirts made from dog teeth, bone flutes, and a bunch of pottery pieces. And on top of all the beautiful stuff this guy was buried with, he was also accompanied by a number of people who were sacrificed. He was incredibly rich, so he was just too above going into the afterlife alone. Next on the list, we have a horrifying pit of severed hands. Apparently severed hands were a big deal in ancient Egypt. Archaeologists made a pretty gruesome discovery when they came across pits filled with severed human hands. They were found during excavations of a palace near the ancient city of Avaris. These pits contained hundreds of severed hands, neatly stacked together, and the largest pit was right in front of the throne room. Researchers believe that these hands were severed from enemies captured in battles or raids. It's not entirely clear why these hands were collected and stored, but there have been images found of soldiers trading severed hands for gold, so some speculate that they might have been offerings to the gods or simply just trophies of victory. Next up, we have the Herxheim archaeological site. So back in 1996, during routine excavations, archaeologists came across this pit filled with human remains. Now, that's gotta be alarming even for an archaeologist. I can't imagine you ever get bored with finding human remains, but what made this find even creepier was how these folks had died. They weren't just the remnants of ordinary burials. There were signs that these people had been deliberately and systematically consumed by other humans. The bones all showed signs of butchering. Cut marks indicated careful dismemberment. It looked like these individuals were not just victims of violence, but also of ritualistic consumption. The pit contained the bones of over 500 people, dating back to the Neolithic period. Some suggest these folks were eaten as part of some sort of religious ritual, but other researchers think this may have been more a case of desperation. Possibly there could have been a famine. Next up, we have Neanderthal markings. So the recent discovery of ancient cave markings thought to be made by Neanderthals is obviously pretty exciting. The markings were found on the walls of a cave in central France and are believed to be over 57,000 years old, which would make them the oldest of their kind. The cave was first stumbled upon in 1846 during some quarrying work. It wasn't until 1912 that the archaeological finds started cropping up, though, with the discovery of animal bones and tools that had likely belonged to Neanderthals. The cave seemed to have been sealed off from the outside world around 57,000 years ago, which is a hefty chunk of time before modern humans even set foot in the region around 42,000 years ago. So it's a solid bet that the finger marks on the walls were the handiwork of Neanderthals. So what are these markings exactly? They're a series of wavy lines, dots, and faint striations, and it's believed that Neanderthals created these engravings by sweeping and pressing their fingers across a thin line of film on the limestone walls. The height of the markings suggests they were made by taller beings, teenagers or adults, but were they decorative, ritualistic, were they even made intentionally? They're still not sure. Now we head back to Egypt with the discovery of an ancient Roman city in Luxor. The news about this incredible find was announced back in January of 2023. Egyptian archaeologists found a very well-preserved Roman city in Luxor, dating back to the 2nd and 3rd centuries CE. It's now been described as the oldest and most important city found on the eastern bank of Luxor by Mustafa Waziri, head of Egypt's Supreme Council of Antiquities. The archaeological team unearthed a whole whackload of these ancient structures, including residential buildings, offering insights into how people lived during that time. There were also the discovery of 2 pigeon towers used for housing carrier birds, meaning this city was very likely involved in communication networks at the time. There were also metal workshops found in the city that contained whole collections of artifacts of their own, pots, tools, and a collection of bronze and copper Roman coins. Next up, we have the 4,500-year-old tomb. This is another recent 2024 archaeological discovery. I really tried to fill this list up with new stuff. So this discovery was made about 20 miles south of Cairo. Egyptian and Japanese archaeologists stumbled on an ancient Egyptian tomb carved into rock over 4,000 years ago. I always say stumbled on, like these archaeologists are just kind of walking around and they're like, oh, it's an ancient tomb. Obviously, there's more that goes into it than that. It's just the easiest way for my brain to wrap my head around it. They stumbled on it. So anyway, the tomb was carved into rock over 4,000 years ago, dated back between 2649 and 2150 BC. The tomb contained a whole bunch of graves and artifacts from different historical periods. During their excavation, the team unearthed a bunch of treasures. There were human remains buried alongside a vividly colored mask, a burial site from the 2nd dynasty, and an incredibly well-preserved alabaster vessel from the 18th dynasty. In the tomb, there were also 2 terracotta statues depicting the ancient Egyptian goddess Isis and Harpocrates, along with a stela with a man's name encrypted on it, a man named Heroides. I think that's how you pronounce it. You've all heard of the Moai statues on Easter Island before, I know, but just last year, archaeologists found a new one. This new statue adds to the nearly 1,000 that have already been found on the island. This latest statue was uncovered in a dry lake bed, the only one to be found in that location. So far, anyway. The discovery was made by the organization that oversees the island's national park. Terry Hunt, a professor of archaeology at the University of Arizona, was incredibly excited about the find and described how important it is that these statues be retrieved, helping to preserve the history of the Rapa Nui people. So with how much attention and research has gone into the Easter Island statues, why was it that this one was just discovered now? Well, they're saying it's probably because of changes in the area's climate, resulting in the drying out of the lake that was surrounding the sculpture, and they're thinking it probably won't be the last one to turn up. Next, we have another exciting discovery. News about this came out just recently as well. A ton of cool artifacts were found in Brazil. And this one's pretty cool because this stuff was discovered completely by accident. This really was like stumbling on it. So there was a routine construction project going on at an apartment complex, but then construction workers came across a pretty alarming find, human bones, and then more and more stuff started turning up. There were also pottery shards, so these bones weren't recent. Turns out all this stuff belonged to an ancient civilization dating back as far as 9,000 years ago. During excavations, they found thousands of artifacts, and not only that, but these artifacts could possibly reshape the understanding of human settlement in Brazil. The site known as Rosanne's Farm was full of stone tools, ceramic fragments, decorated shells, and bones, which was excavated over the course of 4 years of intense digging. And in total, 43 human skeletons and more than 100,000 artifacts were uncovered. Archaeologists unearthed remnants of a group that existed around 8,000 to 9,000 years ago, meaning that humans moved into the region much earlier than previously believed. The leader of the excavation stated the discovery could, quote, completely change the history of not just the region, but all of Brazil. End quote. This finding may totally change the way we look at the timing and the roots of human migration into the Americas from Asia, which is pretty cool. And we're finishing off the list with the finding of a mysterious Anglo-Saxon artifact, again just in January of this year, in Langham, England. A treasure hunter made a pretty cool discovery with a metal detector. It was a small artifact made of gilded silver. It was just under an inch in diameter and 0.3 inches in height. Apparently it dates back to the 8th century. It also has an image of an animal engraved on top, along with Celtic knot-like patterns. Not entirely clear what the object is. The Portable Antiquities Scheme, who are responsible for recording finds like this, noted the thing is similar to other items discovered in the same time period, but this one stands out because of its size and its design. Historian Helen Giak speculated that the spiral pattern on the artifact looked a lot like Celtic designs, and that the animal depicted could be a horse. Definitely what it looks like to me as well. She also praised the craftsmanship, noting that it was created by someone with a keen eye for beauty. And again, I agree, that thing, it looks fantastic.
Number 10, the Ark of the Covenant. If you've seen Indiana Jones, then you're probably familiar with the relic that is known as the Ark of the Covenant. According to the Hebrew Bible, God told Moses to create the Ark of the Covenant in order to store the original tablets on which were written the original 10 Commandments. They did so, making it out of acacia wood and covering it in gold. Around 3,000 years ago, the first temple was built in Jerusalem and the Ark was stored within it until 587 BC when the temple was destroyed. After that, it's not known where the Ark is or what happened to it. Some people saying that it was hidden before the temple was destroyed, while one legend claims that the Ark will not be revealed until the coming of the Messiah, son of David. Some people believe that the Ark was taken to Ethiopia and is stored within a church there, but one scholar said that he had seen this alleged Ark back in World War II and that it's not the original. The Ark of the Covenant is said to have incredible powers such as instant death if you were to touch it, so if it did come back, who knows what it would be used for. Number 9, Noah's Ark. A very famous story from the Bible tells the tale of Noah, who built a massive boat to hold 2 of every animal to save them from a massive flooding of the earth. The flood took place because God believed that man was becoming too wicked, so he picked the person he believed most righteous, Noah, to survive on the ship with his family and the animals in order to repopulate the planet afterwards. After the 150 days of flooding, the ark apparently came to rest on top of the mountains of Ararat. This mountain does actually exist in eastern Turkey, though I think we would have noticed by now if there was a giant boat sitting up there. Many explorers have gone in search of the ark but have yielded no results, most people these days believing that it was just a mythical story and never actually happened. In order to house that many animals, Noah's Ark would have needed to be absolutely massive, so if the boat is out there somewhere, it's probably just small pieces of it. Number 8, the real cross. Across the globe, there are hundreds of pieces of wood that people claim to have come from the original cross that Jesus was crucified on. However, it's unlikely that any of these 2x4s actually came from the cross. During the Middle Ages, religious relics were incredibly popular, and supposed pieces of the cross were popping up all over the place, more than could make any sense. Theologian John Calvin famously said that if all these alleged pieces of the cross were gathered together, they would fill the cargo hold of an entire ship. These fake relics aren't just a thing of the past though, and are still incredibly popular today. One relic seller on eBay was reported to have sold many pieces of the cross for around $500 a pop. Right now, there is no piece of the cross that all scholars can agree is authentic, and it's likely that a true remnant will never actually be found, this being because it would have been made of wood and would have decomposed a long time ago. Number 7, the Copper Scroll. The Dead Sea Scrolls were a series of religious manuscripts that were discovered in the mid-1900s in, you guessed it, the Dead Sea. One of the most unusual of these scrolls is known as the Copper Scroll, it getting this name because it is of course inscribed in copper. The text on the scroll describes the hiding places of vast quantities of treasure, including up to 65 metric tons of gold and silver objects. Unfortunately, we haven't actually been able to find any of these treasures, and that's because the hiding places described on the scroll are incredibly cryptic, it not being your typical X marks the spot buried treasure map. They describe describe the treasure as being hidden in places like in the Great Cistern, which is in the courtyard of the Little Colonnade, and in the eastward-looking cave of the Pillar with 2 entrances. Yeah, definitely pretty vague. Whether or not these treasures actually exist is also up for debate. Some people saying they were real and captured by the Romans, and some people saying that they were just totally made up. Number 6, the Q source. The Q source is the name of a hypothetical text that supposedly was used to help write the Gospel of Matthew and the Gospel of Luke. Most historians believe that the Gospel of Mark was the earliest Christian gospel, and that it and the Q source were used to help the authors of the Gospel of Matthew and Luke write their texts. Archaeologists have so far been unable to find the Q source, leading some people to believe that instead of a written text, it was actually just an oral tradition that was passed down. While there are many copied copies of the famous Christian Gospels, scholars believe it's unlikely that a written Q source would have had many versions, which is what's making it so hard to find to this day. The contents of the Q source is apparently mostly Jesus' sayings, but I guess we'll never know for sure unless a written Q source is actually someday discovered. Number 5, the burial shroud. It's well known that after Jesus' crucifixion, he was buried within a cave, being sealed in behind a large stone. The part of the story that's up for debate is whether or not Jesus actually rose from the dead 3 days later, but we know for a fact he was a real guy who was actually buried in that cave. Mark 15:46 says, "Then Joseph bought a linen cloth, and taking down the body, wrapped it in the linen cloth, and laid it in a tomb that had been hewn out of the rock. He then rolled a stone against the door of the tomb." Many explorers and historians have gone in search of the linen cloth, or shroud, that Jesus was buried in. There have been numerous forgeries over the years, most famously the Shroud of Turin, which was actually created in the Middle Ages. What happened to the real shroud remains unknown to this day, and people say that it's unlikely we'll ever actually be able to find it. Number 4, the Ring of St. Edward. In the year 1005, St. Edward the Confessor was born into the royal family, and in 1042, he took the throne. He was viewed by the people as a deeply religious leader who did many good things, like removing unjust taxes, healing the sick, and taking a vow of chastity. He also built a cathedral that would come to be known as Westminster Abbey. St. Edward healed the sick using a sapphire ring that he had, and one day he was approached by a beggar who asked him for money. He didn't have any money on him, so he instead removed his ring and gave it to the beggar. Years later, pilgrims who were stranded in the Holy Land were rescued by St. John the Evangelist, who had the ring that Edward had given the beggar. He told the pilgrims to return to Edward and give him the ring, and to tell him that he would be dead in 6 months. And he was. The ring was kept in Westminster Abbey for many years, but it and many other relics went missing after the dissolution of the monastery. To this day, the ring has not been located, though it's believed that the sapphire from the ring is the center jewel on the imperial state crown. Number 3, the Veil of Veronica. The story of the Veil of Veronica was not recorded in its current form until the Middle Ages, and tells the story of a meeting between Saint Veronica and Jesus. She encountered Jesus along the Via Dolorosa and stopped to use her veil to wipe the blood and sweat from his brow. When she did so, Jesus' image became copied onto the veil. After that moment, it then apparently gained mythical powers, like quenching thirst, allowing the blind to see, and even raising people from the dead. There is written evidence that the veil was displayed in the 13th to 15th centuries, but after 1527, its fate is unknown. Some people believe that it was destroyed in Rome, or had even been stolen and made its way through taverns. After its disappearance, many copies started to pop up, despite the Pope prohibiting them from being made. In 1629, he then ordered that all copies of the veil be destroyed, and if you refused to give up your copy, you would be excommunicated from the church. Number 2, the Nephilim. In the Bible, the Nephilim were a group of incredibly large and strong beings who lived both before and after the flood, being described as being the offspring of fallen angels and human women. Many critics of the Bible laugh at its description of supposed giants, but if these creatures actually existed, it means that there are probably remains of them out there somewhere. Giant human skeletons that would squash any doubt that they had existed. Archaeological evidence from the ancient times does exist that could show the existence of giants, though it has never really been fully analyzed, as most people brush it off as not having been possible or real. There are other recordings and even art pieces that may also lend credit to the fact that these giants had once existed, and many people believe that the skeletal evidence is out there somewhere, just waiting to be discovered. Number 1. The Holy Grail. If you've seen Monty Python, then you're probably pretty familiar with this one. The Holy Grail, or the Holy Chalice, is the cup that Jesus apparently used during the Last Supper, which he had with his disciples before his crucifixion. The Bible says, "Then he took a cup, and when he had given thanks, he gave it to them, saying, 'Drink from it, all of you. This is my blood of the covenant, which is poured out for many for the forgiveness of sins.'" It's unknown what happened to the Grail after this dinner, but there are a few medieval legends surrounding it. During the reign of King Arthur, many people believed that the cup had magical properties, and Arthur took his knights on a quest to try and find the Grail. Some people believe that Joseph of Arimathea, the man who had buried Jesus, had traveled to Britain and taken the cup with him. As some scholars think the Last Supper might have never even happened, we'll probably never be able to find the true Holy Grail.
And number 10. Ancient Egyptian power tools. We all know how smart the ancient Egyptians must have been, but with their pyramids we couldn't even recreate today if we tried. But with this recent discovery, it seems like these dudes were more technologically advanced than we could have possibly imagined. So this researcher Christopher Dunn was basically Sherlock's homing his way through the remnants of the pyramids, looking at how the ancient builders must have made their stuff, and what he found was seriously mind-boggling. But to the untrained eye, it seems pretty innocuous. Just a simple ribbed core which would have been drilled out from the limestone and discarded during the pyramid's creation. Now those grooves you see when something's been cut. Now Dunn noticed these grooves on the sarcophagus in the king's chamber in the Great Pyramid, but they weren't just any grooves. They were similar to what our modern bandsaws make. See, the thing is, the distance between these grooves were teeny tiny, about 0.05 of an inch. It's like trying to fit an ant between them. Now, nowadays, for us to get those marks, our tools would need to move way slower, but there's more. See, those ancient Egyptians weren't just good at grooving, they were drilling into granite like it was a piece of cake. The drilling technique, which was thought of as trepanning, left behind cores. Now, here's the mind-blowing part. Their drill went into the rock at a crazy rate of 0.1 inch per spin. Today, even with our modern diamond drills spinning at 900 revolutions per minute, we can only manage about 0.0002 inches per spin. It's a whopping 500 times slower than what the ancient Egyptian builders were doing. This means that the Egyptians had access to drilling tools that are more sophisticated than today's technology would allow. So either those dudes back then are smarter than we are, or they were assisted by time travelers from the future. Or both. Probably both. At number 9 is this 1.8 billion year old nuclear reactor. So almost 2 billion years ago, that's billion with a B, when humans weren't even a thought, let alone a species, there might have been a nuclear reactor just chilling in Gabon, Africa. Pretty crazy. In the 70s, these French cats bought some uranium back from there, thinking it was just regular stuff, but as it turns out, it had already been activated and mined. Cue the detective music. Now, scientists went Sherlock on this and found out that this place used to be a full-blown nuclear reactor for 500,000 years. And here's where it gets even nuttier. Dr. Glenn T. Seaborg, a big shot in nuclear science, like I'm talking Nobel Prize winning level over here, he said, hold up, this nuclear reactor can't be a natural formation. Why? Because for uranium to go nuclear, it needs conditions so picky you would think it was a diva. The water needs to be insanely clean, like way cleaner than usual. Plus, there's this special isotope called U-235 that's crucial for the party to start. The uranium-235 isotope levels here were just not enough for a natural nuclear rave. The U-235 levels found in this ancient reactor weren't actually high enough to kickstart this atomic party. So think about it. A nuclear reactor before humanity was even a thing. Time travel vibes or what? This artifact throws textbooks out the window. If you're enjoying this video so far, please support the channel by pressing like, subscribing to Most Amazing, and ringing that notification bell. Number 8. this 2.8 billion year old sphere. It's even older than the reactor. So imagine stumbling upon these tiny round things in a South African mine, thinking that they're just kind of cute little rocks. But no, some folks argue that they might be the ultimate proof that time travel is real. Known as the Klerksdorp spheres are like celebrities of the geology world. People debate whether or not they're natural or handmade by ancient humans. Now here's the kicker. Well, it wouldn't be ancient humans because it's far older than our species. But here's the kicker. These guys have neat grooves on their surface, and they're tougher than tough, not even being able to be scratched with steel. Pretty wild, kind of makes you wonder how those grooves were even put there in the first place. These spheres are older than old, like 2.8 billion years ancient, which is super mind-boggling. But here's where the mystery deepens. See, nobody's really sure how these things were formed. Some say they're formed by nature, but those grooves in that hardness, it's a really tough nut to crack. Now this debate is huge. If these spheres were made by prehistoric monkey people back in ancient times, it's a game changer for the history books. But if nature's the artist here, well, it's one tricky piece of Earth's history's puzzle that we're still trying to figure out. These spheres might hold the key to unlocking some incredible secrets of our past. At number 7 are the 150,000-year-old pipes. Pipes, yeah, like the ones for plumbing, just chilling in this cave that dates back 150,000 years. That's way before our great-great-great-great-great-grandparents were even a twinkle in somebody's eye. And even way before the ancient Romans figured out how plumbing works. But here's the kicker. When experts took a closer look at these pipes, they found something mind-boggling. About 8% of the material used to make these pipes couldn't be identified whatsoever. It's like trying to figure out what's in a secret sauce recipe, but with way more mystery involved. But there's more! These pipes aren't your run-of-the-mill kind. They're actually a bit on the radioactive side. Yeah, pipes that emit radioactivity kind of makes you wonder what the people putting through those pipes. Kind of makes you wonder what was in their diet. Now this isn't your everyday plumbing material. A geology expert thinks that maybe these pipes were formed when super hot stuff from way down in the Earth's belly rose up and solidified into tubes, which sounds plausible, but even this expert scratched their head and admitted that there's something pretty strange going on here. So these pipes could be the breadcrumbs hinting at the possibility of time travel being more than just a sci-fi dream. They're like a sneak peek into a world we thought only existed in wild sci-fi movies, but hey, the mystery remains unsolved. At number 6, the glorification of the Eucharist from the late 16th century. Ventura Salimbeni's painting in the Church of St. Peter Montalcino. It's in Italy. It's a head scratcher for sure. Imagine this, the experts, all knowledgeable about art history, were trying to explain this weird spherical thing in the painting that's what's supposed to be a creation globe, and the wand-like objects that are being held by Jesus Christ and God are symbols of divine power, but here's where it gets really interesting. Have you guys ever heard of Sputnik? That was the very first satellite sent into space by the Soviets way back in '57. Now picture this. There's a replica of Sputnik sitting pretty in the National Air and Space Museum, and when you get the painting and the Sputnik and you put them side by side, they're literally twins, separated by centuries. Same size, same shine, even down to the little prong. Now some folks entertain the wild idea that maybe Sputnik did a quick time travel stint swinging back to the 16th century. Others, though, they lean towards the UFO theory. Yeah, the thing in the painting might just be an unidentified flying object. But here's the kicker. The mystery remains unsolved. Is this due to time travel? Is it UFOs? Jury's still out on this one, waiting for a Sherlock Holmes of the art world to crack open this case. Time travel? Maybe. UFOs? Possibly. At number 5 are the Nazca lines. These massive drawings, sprawling across the Peruvian desert, are seriously something else. They've been around for more than 1,500 years. Just imagine, back when there were no smartphones or drones, these ancient folks managed to create giant images that you could only fully appreciate from up in the sky. Now, the variety of these drawings, the animals, the shapes, and the designs are so precise it's hard to believe that they were made without some kind of aerial guidance. Some folks think that they represent constellations or maybe a sort of homage to gods, but the mystery here is still unsolved. In 2022, archaeologists stumbled upon 150 new Nazca lines. I mean, you'd think after all these years with Google Earth and satellites and whatnot, we'd at least found them all by now, but no, these discoveries just keep adding more questions. At number 4 is the Iron Pillar of Delhi. This thing has perplexed experts for ages. I mean, we're talking about an iron column that has stood tall for at least 1,500 years. Some even speculate that it might be older than that. And here's the kicker, despite all those years, it's rust-free. Now let's get into the nitty-gritty. This pillar is 99.72% pure iron. It's impressive by today's standards even. I'm talking about a level of purity that even modern experts struggle to achieve. They've tried to replicate it and they can't crack the code. And get this, and they can't crack the code as even our iron is only like 99.8% pure iron, which is like 0.8% more, which is crazy. But what's even crazier is that it doesn't have any of the usual suspects found in modern high-grade iron like manganese and sulfur. It's just a pure iron anomaly. The grave Nakisos of an enthroned woman with an attendant from 100 BC. This stone carving from over 2,000 years ago depicts a strange sight. A kid holding what looks like a laptop in front of a person seated on a throne. The artwork, chilling at the Getty Villa in Los Angeles, got some folks scratching their heads. The museum even claims this box is a container, yet one that's far too shallow to hold anything big. Now some say it's a jewelry box or a makeup box, comparing it to other stuff that... Now some say it's a jewelry or a makeup box, but what if it's not? Imagine if the folks who built the Imagine if the folks who sculpted this used high-tech software like AutoCAD on their MacBook, which sounds pretty bonkers. This artifact seems to raise eyebrows because it's familiar to our tech, but it's from way, way back. At number 2 is the 2,000-year-old batteries. Imagine stumbling upon a set of ancient jars, which would be pretty cool in its own, but these aren't just any old jars, mind you. They're like the ancestors of modern-day batteries. Picture clay jars decked out with asphalt stoppers and iron rods, kicking it from all the way back from 2,000 years ago. This conveyance consists of a clay vessel inside which is a copper cylinder held in place by asphalt. And within the cylinder, archaeologists found an oxidized iron rod. So back in 1938, this German archaeologist named Wilhelm Koenig suggested that these could be galvanic cells, perhaps used for electroplating gold onto silver objects. Nobody could prove the dude wrong, especially since all you need was to fill it with acid or alkalines. Considering all you needed to do was fill it with an acid or alkaline substance to produce an electric charge. These jars, let's call them ancient batteries, can actually whip up more electricity than you'd expect, churning out just over a volt, which is pretty shocking, pun intended. Now, the battery wouldn't have been a very effective one, but still, ancient batteries. At number 1, let's dive into these ancient paintings. First is the Madonna with Saint Giovanni. This painting is famous for having a blob-like thing in the sky. I mean, we have Mary, baby Jesus, Saint John just chilling in a classic 15th century scene, but where's that disc-shaped blob to the right of Mary? It's got a guy and a dog staring at it. Some peeps speculate that this might be more than just the Holy Family going on here. Some think that those beings might be from outer space. Imagine that, extraterrestrials photobombing a centuries-old painting. Now, this other painting, the Inoculation with Saint Emetius, is a whole different story. This masterpiece illustrates the Gabriel angel giving Mary the heads up about baby Jesus. But hold up, in this painting, it appears like Mary's receiving the news from a beam of light coming from a strange otherworldly object. Some folks got way out there suggesting that Mary might have had an otherworldly encounter leading to her pregnancy with Jesus. So was Christ an alien? Probably.